Thank you for watching this recording on using special considerations to identify gifted and talented GT students. As we explore this topic, I would like us to consider these questions. What are special considerations? Why are special considerations important? And what are some special consideration best practices? First, what are special considerations in the context of identifying students for the gifted program? According to the regulation, school personnel must take into consideration environmental, cultural, and disabling conditions which may mask a child's true abilities that lead to the exclusion of eligible students, such as a student who qualifies as an exceptional child is defined in Kentucky Regulation Statute KRS 157.200, disadvantaged or underachieving. What does this mean? To understand the regulation, let's look at some of the words as they are defined in regulation for the subsection. These are the categories for exceptional children or students with disabilities according to KRS 157.200. As we look for students with gifted abilities, it is important to know that students identified as having a disability in any of these categories may be considered for the gifted program. The definitions for all of the categories on this slide can be found on the link provided for KRS 157.200. As we think about students with disabilities, let's look at three profiles of students who might be 2E or twice exceptional. I hope these profiles help us understand the challenges in identifying a student who might be twice exceptional or 2E. In the first profile, the student has been identified as a gifted student, but not as a student with a disability. This is the just try harder profile. This may be because as a gifted student, the disability is hidden due to the student's strengths, such as verbal acuity or being on grade level or above grade level. However, identification of the student's disabilities could help us understand the student's frustrations at school so that services could be provided to support their needs. If you are working with a gifted student and observe they are struggling with items such as organization, reading, or behavior, you could reach out to your special education staff. They may want to observe or do some research to see if the student should be referred for special education services. For some students, it's not a matter of just trying harder. It's a matter of they may have a disability that is going unseen. The next profile, profile number 2, is the can't be gifted profile. In this profile, students just can't be gifted. In this example, the student's gifts and talents are overlooked due to the challenging nature of the disability. Without an emphasis on the student's strengths or talents, the student may fail in school or have poor self-esteem. Their behaviors can become increasingly negative in the classroom due to feelings of low self-esteem or lack of interest in school. For some, there could be a misconception when identifying students for the gifted program that the student must be good, meaning the student must have good behavior, strong leadership skills, or be good or excel in all school subjects. The regulation, however, does not state a student must be good in all these areas. There are 5 gifted categories in the state of Kentucky, and none of the criteria states a student must have good behavior or excel in all subject areas. In the final profile, the just average profile, the student is neither identified with a disability or with a talent. Because the student has high cognitive abilities, they are able to compensate for the learning disability. This may be the most challenging student to identify. Some signs to watch for gifted and talented identification would be advanced vocabulary, questions that are evidence of critical thinking, and visual and performing arts talent. Next, let's look at the term disadvantage and how it is defined in the gifted regulation. Disadvantage means a student is operating under conditions that have a negative impact on normal cognitive or affective social emotional growth. A student's negative cognitive or affective growth could be due to socioeconomic conditions, cultural isolation, or various combinations of these factors to a degree that requires special consideration. Next, let's discuss underachieving students. Underachieving is also defined in the gifted regulation. An underachieving student is a student who could excel, but for different reasons is not exhibiting high ability or achievement. Over time, if the student is not encouraged to grow in their areas or gifts or talents, the student's trajectory for success could be diminished. For underachieving students, we need to work with our counselors so that the appropriate social emotional support can be provided, and this student can grow and reach their full potential. Let's pause and reflect. Take this time to pause the video and either individually reflect or have a group discussion. What has been your experience with using special considerations? What impact could utilizing special considerations have on the GT program? Why are special considerations important? Let's discuss that. Here are some reasons why special considerations are important. Special considerations are important because it provides equitable opportunities for all students to be evaluated for the GT program. When a district provides equitable consideration for all students, students through services and support have the opportunity to grow and to use their abilities to further their personal growth. This growth could positively impact the communities where the student lives. The student could be contributing to the community through service, leadership, or performance in the visual and performing arts. Gifted and talented identification and services could be the catalyst that changes the life trajectory of a student. Recently, someone shared a story about a student who was underachieving, but one of the student's teachers recognized gifts and potentials in the student. The student was identified for the gifted program, and through encouragement, challenging coursework, and hard work, is now in medical school. For special considerations to be implemented, the Gifted and Talented Selection and Placement Committee must understand special considerations and how it can be used when reviewing student evidence for the gifted program. We'll be talking about the GT Selection and Placement Committee in a moment. But first, let's look at a couple of myths about gifted and talented students. As we think about special considerations, let's look at some of these myths and how they can be dispelled by using special considerations when identifying students for the Gifted and Talented program. Myth number 1, gifted students must be good at everything. Gifted students do not have to be good at everything. Often, students are identified in only one area. A student may struggle in academics, but be extremely gifted in the arts or creativity, which is not to say that arts or creativity are not academic. Students may have a disability, be disadvantaged in some way, or be underachieving. However, they also may have gifts and talents, and we should be looking for these strengths and referring students for the gifted program. Myth number 2, gifted students are always mature, self-directed, and well-behaved. Gifted students may develop in an asynchronous manner, meaning cognitively they are advanced but growing at a normal rate socially and emotionally, and also physically. Sometimes students who are bored will act up because they have completed their work and have nothing to do. Also, some gifted students are very passionate or more knowledgeable about a subject than their teacher and feel compelled to share their knowledge. Students with social emotional behavior disorders may not be considered for the gifted program because staff believe to be a gifted student, they must be a good student. However, a student does not have to be good to be considered for the gifted and talented program. Number 3, gifted students don't need any extra help. They are smart enough to figure it out for themselves. Gifted students may pick up on the content quicker than other students, but they certainly do struggle at times. Sometimes they will not say anything for fear of not appearing gifted. They may think they should not struggle and they must have all the correct answers. Special considerations are important for these students because students who are smart but may be struggling could be referred for special education identification, but not for gifted education. Sometimes it's challenging to see a student's strengths than to see their gifts and talents. The Gifted and Talented Selection and Placement Committee are the staff members who review student evidences for identification. Therefore, the committee must understand how special considerations or exceptions to the criteria must be discussed when reviewing a student for the gifted program. The members of this committee listed on this slide should know if a student has a disability, is disadvantaged, or underachieving. According to the regulation, the GT Identification and Placement Committee are made up of the GT Coordinator or GT Teacher, representatives of classroom teachers, administrators, counselors, special education, and other appropriate personnel. Who are some other appropriate personnel who would be important to invite to be a part of this committee? Who might have knowledge about the gifts and talents of special education students? Now that we have discussed who should be on the committee, let's review the purpose of the committee, or purposes. As we discussed earlier, one of the purposes is to determine which students meet identification criteria. Therefore, since they are the ones determining who meets identification criteria, it is very important that they understand that special considerations can be used if there are conditions that may be masking a student's gifts and talents and ultimately keeping the student from being considered for the GT program. Let's pause and reflect on using special considerations. Use this time for individual reflection or group discussion. What obstacles does your district have when using special considerations? What does the data indicate about how special considerations are used in the GT program? What are some ways to overcome or implement special considerations in your school or district? Finally, let's talk about some best practices for using special considerations. Universal screening is important because it gives all students an opportunity to be considered for GT services, not just those referred by teachers or parents. Having a GT committee that is comprised of different grade levels and different areas is important so that a variety of views can be shared. Staff need to understand that special considerations or exceptions can be made when reviewing identification evidence for students who are being referred. And finally, there may be students that the GT committee would like more evidence in order to make a decision about identification. Again, let's pause and reflect. Use this time to stop the video and reflect individually or have a group discussion. What best practices for special considerations are being implemented in your district or school? Could any of these practices be improved? Thank you for attending the presentation today on special considerations. I hope that you have gathered some good information to take back to your district or school to share. Please contact me if you have any questions. I am always glad to help.